Hello, I'm Rick Hertless, founder of His Gospel Power. Thank you for joining with our program. As we look into the book of Daniel, we are in chapter 1. Before we get into the study today, please go to hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button, and thank you so much to those who do support our program through your prayer support and through your financial gifts. We are now in the book of Daniel, chapter 1. We're in verse 18. Verse 18. It says, "Now at the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. Then the king interviewed them, and among them all, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they served before the king." And of course, we're talking about Daniel. It's funny that they use the name Daniel. They do not use the Hebrew names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I think that puts more of a light on Daniel, is the reason. Because remember, Nebuchadnezzar had changed Daniel's name also to Belteshazzar. And Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, that was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those were the Hebrew names. These are the new names that Nebuchadnezzar had given them: Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And so I think what's going on here is that it is putting more of an emphasis on the fact that Daniel was the leader and that he was filled more with the Spirit than any of them. Now, not to say that they were not walking in the Spirit, because we're going to see that later on that they are. But it says, so he found that none was like them. None had the wisdom. None were like these four. And why was that? Because they were filled with the power of the Holy Spirit. They were filled with the Spirit of God. And it says, in verse 20, "And in all matters of wisdom and understanding, about which the king examined them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers who were in all his realm. Thus Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus." And so we are seeing that this is God not only filled them and made them better than everyone, 10 times greater is what he made them. God still will use you in that capacity today, if you will step up and allow him to do so. You cannot sit back and do nothing, sit back in your laurels, as they say, and expect God to use you. You have to step out first. Just like what we saw in the very first part of this chapter, Daniel, he took a bold step, and he says, hey, no, I can't. Now, it would have been easy. It would have been very easy for Daniel. He's a captive, okay? Daniel's a slave, basically. It would have been extremely easy for him to say, well, God, they've said this is the diet we have to do, and so we're going to do it because this is what they said, and we have to follow what they said. And instead, he stepped out and did what he knew God wanted them to do. He didn't try to compromise what God wanted him to do. Instead, that's what we do. We do that ourselves right now. Think about all of the so-called Christian leaders that we see that have the 501c3. The 501c3, to those who do not know, 501c3 is the tax-exempt status that the government gives to the churches. And that as long as they abide by all of the rules of the government, they can keep that 501c3 status. And what that does is that allows you to have a tax deduction whenever you give your money to the church, which helps the money continue to come into the church in volumes. Whereas churches should be saying, you know what, we don't need that tax exempt status. God's going to take care of us. But instead what's happening is the churches will compromise. The government says that no church can preach or talk about a candidate. It used to be 6 weeks. It may be longer than that now, but it used to be 6 weeks prior to an election. It was illegal, according to the 501c3, to stand in the pulpit and talk against, say, Hillary Clinton or whoever, an opponent of a political party. You couldn't do that, or they would come in and they'd strip you of your 501c3. Well, that's compromise is done all over the country right now, and it's been that way for years since the 60s when the 501c3 started. That's how long it's been going on, to where they basically, Lyndon Johnson silenced the churches is what he did. Lyndon Baines Johnson, the churches came against him and helped defeat him in one of the elections that he was going for. And he said, whenever I get the power, I'm going to pay them back for that. And he did. When he got the power, he instituted the 501c3 program in the name of doing good for the church. The churches bought into it hook, line, and sinker instead of using the wisdom of God. And so then effectively after that they were silenced. They could no longer speak against a political opponent without recourse of losing their 501c3. So we are compromising every single day as a church. Daniel, on the other hand, said, no, I'm not going to compromise on my diet. On something as simple as my diet, when he really had legs to stand on before God to say, well, I've got to obey what they say. Brother Ron Stoyle.
Oh, this is one of my points that really irks me. And I actually did deeper research into that 501c3. And what is really interesting about that, the 501c3 really doesn't do anything for the churches, because if you look at page 2 of the IRS code, churches are already exempt.
Exactly.
What the 501c3 does is it benefits the people that give to it. It doesn't benefit financially, it doesn't benefit the organization.
Well, really, it should even been, if the church is already exempt, that would mean that you would already still have, even if you were giving to the church, you have a charitable exemption just giving to the church. So really, it doesn't benefit either party.
Well, and really, what they like you said, they used it to silence.
They're using it as a tool because of the ignorance of the preachers and of the congregations. They think they have to have the 501c3 tax exempt. Because of that, the ignorance of the churches and the pastor makes them give their control over to the government.
And what it does is it allows the nonprofits, not just churches, but any nonprofit, it gives them a tool to recruit financial givers to their organization.
Right, that's what it does.
Because they tell them, if you give to us, you'll get a tax exemption.
Right.
When they don't need it, and the people that giving it are, if you're giving in a Christian manner, then your reward comes from God. You're not, people that are seeking the reward from the government,
that's all they get.
And the verses that say that, Matthew 6:3-4. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. If you are giving to a nonprofit, doesn't matter what, church, nonprofit, any ministry, and you are doing it for that tax exempt status,
you've received your reward.
You have received your reward.
If you stand before God and you've given $1 million to the church, you're going to stand before Him someday and say, and He's passing out rewards and say, well, God, I gave $1 million to the church. And He's going to say, well, didn't you get your tax deduction for that? And you're going to say, well, yes. And He said, well, you got your reward. It's not going to be anything like the rewards in heaven.
Right. And when I actually studied deeper into that, I got convicted about it. And what I started doing from that day forward is giving cash. I never filled out an envelope.
Right.
I didn't even write checks because they still record that. Now, if you're writing a check with the right heart, that's fine.
That's right. Yeah, because whatever financial instrument you have to use, that's fine. But if you're writing it only to get the deduction,
I even went as far as, even when they sent me the statement, I still didn't use it on my tax return.
Right.
And that is the steps that Christians need to take. Knowing you're not going to get a secondary benefit from it, solely relying on the benefit from God. I eliminated all possibility of taking advantage of the system. So I just went straight cash giving, so that it was not recorded, so that really only God could reward me for it. And
he does.
He does.
Over and over and over again. I mean, that's the amazing thing. And now I'm speaking to myself, okay? So if you think I'm speaking to you, you're wrong. I'm speaking to myself. So many times we limit God in what we believe or say he can do. I mean, I do this all the time. And I will still get nervous about a bill or something I don't really have the money for, and the next thing I know, boom, there's the money, and God's like, why do you worry about this? And yet, and that's sin, by the way. If you're worrying all the time, that's not trusting God. I mean, Jesus said, remember, take no thought what you will eat or what you will drink. Your Father knows you have need of these things. Even the sparrows of the air, who he takes care of the sparrows of the air. So why would he not take care of you? And so, but we do that all the time. I mean, I know it's human nature. I try, and there's many times I don't necessarily worry, but there are still those times that I do. I guess it's just part of us, or it's part of me, I should say. Maybe that may not be something that you have to overcome, but it is part of me. That's something I have to fight with.
Well, that's like even me at work. We have this joke at work. We get paid on Friday, so we all cash our checks on Saturdays in the bank. So we all work on Saturday, and we make the joke Saturday morning. We go, it's kind of like as we're leaving, we go, well, I'll see you on Monday if my check clears.
Right.
But honestly, doesn't that speak to what we're somewhat truly thinking? Now, we're being honest. If my check doesn't clear, I'm not coming back on Monday, obviously. But the fact that we say it means we're thinking it, that there may be a possibility that I may not have this money. Now, do I truly believe it's going to cash? Yes. Am I trusting God that it's going to cash? Of course. But the fact we're still joking about it means that, we're still worried about the possibility that it may not happen.
And of course, at that point, with your check, let's say, that's really trusting man. You're trusting that he's got the money in the bank to pay you. At the same time, if the money really, and the next step to me is if the money doesn't clear,
where are you going to go from there?
At that point, you've got to trust God to give you whatever money it was that you needed to continue to do whatever it was, whether it be pay your house payment or electric bill or whatever, in the next step of your life, of your relationship.
Yeah. Now, obviously, I'm not that tight that it's like if it doesn't clear Monday, I'm going to be broke and homeless. But yeah, it's it truly is. If it doesn't clear, then who are you going to rely on?
Right. Exactly.
Are you going to go chew your owner out because your check didn't clear and demand cash payment for your work? Or are you going to get down on your knees and pray, God, I don't know what happened in this. I pray that it gets cleared up. If something like that happens, what is your next step? And that's truly what it comes down to. Yeah, we can joke.
And really, you can almost flip that. We can flip it on its ear. Because we'll take this to health, for example. I believe you should be praying for your health daily. I believe you should, and you get sick, you go to God first. You don't go to the doctor first, you go to God first. That's not the way we do it here in America. We go to the doctor first. When all else fails, we turn to God. It's the same with our finances. We should be continuously praying for our boss, or if we're the boss, praying for our business that the Lord keeps on bringing the finances in, instead of when the finances don't come in, then all of a sudden we turn to Him. So if we keep the relationship in order, and the relationship in order is that we are continuously going to God and talking to Him with that relationship, understanding that He's got this.
Well, on the health side of it, because it's that time of year, cold, heat changes in Texas. We get a 70-degree temperature change in one day now, so people are getting sick. My wife always asks me, like, when I start to come down with something, why don't you just take something? Take some pharmakia, some sorcery, some medicine. She doesn't put it that way, but we know Scripture.
No, we know Scripture.
And I tell her every time, I said, if there's something wrong with me, I want to figure out naturally what's wrong. Is it congestion? Is it the flu? Is it a virus? I would rather treat it God's way. And then if it's that bad that it doesn't work, then okay, I got it. That, God put doctors there. Dr. Luke,
Right.
So
there was Dr. Luke.
But I am one of those. I will suffer a little longer to fight it off naturally so I don't have to put who knows what kind of medication in my system. And, she questions me on it, and rightfully so. She wants to see me healthy. I got it. I love her for it. But I am at that point where I don't want medicine in my system.
No, I don't want to fully trust the doctors. I want to trust God.
Yes.
And you're right. Trust me, if my arm is dangling, if I break my arm and I'm dangling, guess what? I'm probably going to go and ask somebody to put it back on for me.
Right.
Now, granted, though, on the way, I'm going to be praying, Lord, straighten my arm.
Yeah, save me that bill, please.
Forget about the bill. I don't want to go through the rest of the pain. Just like my great granddaughter with her rock in her nose. Lord, take care of this for us.
Well, when you were saying that, from the physical side, you were talking about that. I was also thinking about the time it would waste to go to the doctors, the financial heartache of whatever bills would come of that. God takes all that into account. Does he feel you need to deal with that? No, he'd rather heal her and get it over with.
And I was actually thinking of the crying and the screaming that I was going to have to hear from my baby. I did not. Yeah. That was hurting me more than anything. They slapped me with a bill. Okay. But I don't want to hear my baby suffer.
Yeah, well,
and that's really, what, the crux of us is that we're God's babies. I look at all the way from my granddaughter, all the way from my son, who is now over 40, down to my great-granddaughter. They're all my babies, and I don't want to see them suffer. And with God, they don't have to. Now, God may take them through, especially once they get out of the house and once they're living their own lives, He may make them, they may have to cry. He may chastise them for something they're doing. But if I have anything to do with it, my prayers are going to be that they don't suffer. My prayers are going to be that God heal them, take care of them, or do whatever it takes. Well, that's all the time that we have for this week. Thank you for joining with our program this week, and thank you for joining with our study of Daniel as we've gone through the first chapter. We've got several more weeks, of course, to go to be able to finish off Daniel, but it's going to be an exciting study as we look at the character of God, we look at the character of Daniel, and I pray you're looking within yourself as the character of yourself as well. And so, as we look at all of these things, helping us to understand how we are to live for Jesus in these last days. Well, please go to our website, hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your financial support. Until next time, I pray you receive His gospel power today.
He died for you. He died for me. From our sin, He set us free. He loved us so, His life He gave. So if we ask, we can be saved. He's calling you, He's calling you. Jesus Christ is calling you. If He's touched your heart and soul, let Jesus make you